Hello everyone, welcome to Don't Get Taken for a Ride, our webinar series on how to buy a car. Don't Get Taken for a Ride, for those of you who don't know, my name is Bruce Ross. I am the author of the book, and the book is designed to help people buy a new or used car. So we are the definitive guide on buying a new or used car. We take you step by step through the whole car buying process, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but let's get on with this webinar and see if we can answer some of your questions about leasing. So this webinar is avoid these costly mistakes when leasing a car. So what I want to go over is just a few bullet points here. I want to go over the advantages and disadvantages of leasing a car, the leasing terminology, very important to understand that if you're going to lease a car, using your resources, always negotiate, and what I mean by that is you always negotiate the price of the car. Even though you are leasing it, you can still negotiate that price, because that price determines how much the lease is. The no money down payment for leasing a car, it does still happen today. Fees and hidden fees. So there's fees that are above the board and that you can see and you know that there are fees associated with the car, but there's hidden fees there as well, and if you don't read the contract carefully, you could be hit with those. How much do you drive? That should determine whether or not you should lease. Car insurance coverage, believe it or not, is more expensive on a lease because there's more risk to the car insurance companies. Watch out for hidden surprises, and the most important one, you can walk away. So, you guys ready to get started? Let's do this. First, leasing is not for everyone. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people go in and get a car on a lease and then immediately regret leasing the car. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Remember, leasing is not for everybody. In fact, it's for most people, leasing you shouldn't even do it. It doesn't make financial sense to lease a car at all. There are some exceptions, like if you're a business owner and you run a business, maybe a catering business or a carpet cleaning business, and you use vehicles to do stuff for your work, then it might make some sense to lease a car. But for the bulk of the people, for most people, leasing doesn't make sense. And I'm going to actually just real quickly run you through the numbers, and then I'll let you decide if leasing would work for you or not. Buying versus leasing. So I created a scenario here. So let's say you got a lease deal and you put $2,000 down on that lease, and your payments are around $199 a month for 3 years, right? So the total cost of that lease for the 3 years would come out to around $9,163. And for argument's sake, let's say you found that exact same lease for another 3 years, so you leased the car again for a total of 6 years. That comes out to $18,326, or $3,054 over the 6 years. Now, let's say that same vehicle, you had a purchase price. You're going to get a loan for it. You purchased that car for $20,840. If you put that same $2,000 down, finance that car for 48 months at 2.5%, your monthly payment would come to $412.88. At the end of the 4-year loan, the total cost to purchase the car outright with interest comes to $21,817. So over the 6 years, your annual cost would come out to $3,636 a year. Now, at this point, you're thinking, well, look, a lease is way cheaper. It's by almost like $600 a year. But the part you're not thinking about is after the loan is paid off, you own your car. You have the asset, and I'll put asset in quotes because a car is not really an asset, and we all know it actually loses value over time. But for argument's sake, let's say your car is in middle of the road condition and your car fetches about $10,000 on the private market. So when you sell the car or apply it as a trade-in to your next car purchase, your cost of ownership is reduced to $11,817, or $1,969 a year. That's a savings of $1,085 a year. And if you take that over the 6 years, it's $6,500. So as you can see in this scenario, buying is way cheaper than leasing. So you guys just have to figure out what's right for you. So let's get into this real quick. I don't want to make this webinar very long. I know sometimes they can get long-winded, but the information is extremely important. So I need to kind of expand on some things sometimes. So the advantages and disadvantages of leasing. I'm just going to go over this real quick because there are some pros and some cons to doing this. So the pros are you get a lower monthly payment, and often sometimes you can do a no down payment. So that lower monthly payment, another pro to this is that you can drive a much better car for less money. And what I mean by that is you can go out and buy a luxury car, and if you lease it and you negotiate the price in your favor, you can get a luxury car and drive it around for the 3 years or 4 years, whatever the lease is, and you can afford it. Whereas if you just went and bought that car, buying it and paying that high monthly payment probably just wouldn't do very well for you. So it's something to consider. It's a pro side of leasing that you can get a much more expensive car. Now, I don't recommend doing it. That's probably the worst thing you can do. And as you just saw, leasing is not a very good idea. A couple more pros to it is the repair costs. More than likely, the vehicle is under a factory warranty at all times. So it's everything's covered. If something goes wrong with the car, it's covered. You get a new car every 2 to 3 years. Some people like that. Look, some people don't mind spending the money and throwing the money away every month, and that's perfectly fine. Everybody's wherever they're at, but that's something that you have to decide if that's something for you to do. The cons of it is you don't own the car. At the end of the lease, you turn it in, although you can buy it back, and I will talk a little bit more about that. But generally, you turn the car in, all that money you paid on it is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. Another con is mileage limits, and this is something that's why I had a whole slide on making sure you check what mileage you drive, because and that's very important, because if you go over that mileage, you will end up paying a lot of money. It's like 25 cents a mile, so you got to be careful. Another disadvantage is wear and tear charges. Now, wear and tear is just a gray area out there that leases really don't explain a lot about. But what is wear and tear? What is wear and tear to you versus what is wear and tear to a dealer? So you got to make sure you understand where you both lie on that. Right, so we'll move on, go to leasing terminology. If you're going to lease a car, you had better know some of these terminologies. Go on Google, do a search for leasing terminology. You'll get a whole list of them. I'm just going to cover a few here. I'm not going to go over them all, but you can kind of research this on your own. So the capitalized cost, this is the price of the car that you negotiated with the dealer. I alluded to that a little bit earlier. This is the price you guys agreed on that you would actually pay for the car. Were you buying it outright? Depreciation, this is the amount in which the property loses its value. And this can be over the 2 or 3 years or 4 years that you have the lease. This is the depreciating value of the car. Early termination, yes, there's an early termination clause on all leases, and it means that if you want to get out of the car, there's verbiage in there that tells you what it's going to cost you. And it will cost you. Gap insurance, you guys heard this before. Gap insurance covers the difference between what you actually owe on the car and what the insurance company will pay to pay off the car. Say you totaled the car or something happened like that. Residual value. This is the leasing company's prediction of what the car is going to be worth at the end of the lease. Now, it says prediction. They don't know for sure. The car could be worth more. The car could be worth less. It just depends on the car and the record of that car for the next 3 years, right? It could be worth a lot more or it could be worth a lot less. But anyway, the residual value is what the company, the leasing company, predicts the car is going to be worth. And the term, of course, is the term of the contract, the lease, whether it be 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever you got. Very important. Use online resources. We have a world at our fingertips, right on our phones even. You can even talk to Google and it'll tell you anything you want to ask them. It'll tell you, and it's pretty accurate. So do your research, do your homework before you go into the dealership. You should know the price of the car, which we're going to talk about next year. Right? Always, always, always negotiate the price of the car. Whether you're buying or leasing, I'll tell you this. Negotiate the price of the car. The price of the car determines your monthly payment. Period. It's that simple. If the car's $40,000 and you negotiate it down to $30,000, you save $10,000 in payments over the 3 years. That's quite a bit of money. So you always negotiate the price of the car. Never negotiate the monthly payment. And always negotiate from the dealer cost up. You've done your homework. You know what they paid for the car. You negotiate from that price and work your way up to where you feel comfortable. Don't start from that sticker price and go down. That sticker price is overpriced by many thousands of dollars, some of them tens of thousands of dollars. So your negotiating will hit a stall really quick, and you'll get tired. Your brain will be fried. The numbers will be mixed. They'll have you confused, and you will end up paying more for that car. No money down. There are a lot of times where people put no money down on buying a car, and the same is true for leasing a car. Some of them, you've heard them sign and drive. Now, don't be fooled by this. Sometimes it's not always money down. You're going to have to come up with the taxes and all that stuff, and maybe the first month's payment on these cars. So don't expect that you're not going to put any money down when you go to get a car. Fees and hidden fees. There are a lot of fees associated with a lease, many more than when just buying a car. So you have to be careful. There's an acquisition fee. It can run anywhere from $500 to $1,000, and this is just a fee the dealership charges to get the car, prepared for you. And sometimes those can be very expensive preparations, even though there ain't much that they got to do. Tear some plastic off the car and some plastic off the seats, and the car's good to go, right? There's a disposition fee. This is charged by the leasing company to cover the expense of cleaning the car when you bring it back. So they got to clean the car and maybe fix any damage or small repairs that need to be done to the car. So you got to be careful, read the leasing contract, make sure you know what that is. And there's a bunch of other fees. I tell you to read the lease. Read. I can't reiterate that enough. There's going to be fees in there for when you return the car, and you'd better know what those fees are going to be. Otherwise, you're going to be a little shocked when you get that car back, when you take the car back, and there's all these different fees in there. So do your homework. Again, you can search online, and most time you can find what those fees are. How much do you drive? I talked about this earlier. Before you even think about leasing a car, determine how many miles you drive a day, or a month, or a year, whatever the case may be. Determine what that is up front. And if you drive more than 12,000 miles a year, do not get a lease. You will end up paying a lot of money. Look, and you can negotiate the miles you can drive per year with the dealer, but you're going to end up paying for it either way, whether it's going to be in your monthly payments or when you return the car. So you have to make sure that you don't drive the car a lot. Otherwise, you will end up paying huge fees at the end. And trust me, when you get the bill at the end of the lease and you've been charged 25 cents per mile you went over, do the math. It doesn't take very many miles to charge you $1 and then $10 and then $100. So make sure you are not driving a lot, and maybe a lease might be an option for you. Car insurance coverage. This will go up. There is more risk to the insurance company when you lease a car. There's a couple of reasons for this, and one off the top of my head is that a lot of people like to get out of their leases, so they will crash their cars or set them on fire. Yes, people do that. It is crazy what people will do to get out of a lease that they don't want to be in. That's why I say leases are not for everybody. It's for a select few people, and you all know who you are. And again, it talks about gap insurance there. That covers the difference between the payoff of the car and what you owe on the car. Hidden surprises. There's always hidden surprises, right? In any contract, if you don't read it, there's going to be a hidden surprise for you. But this just alludes to what I talked about earlier. You're going to have to pay, maybe there's an excise tax in your state, right? Where you have to pay, some people call it a luxury tax, where you have to pay a certain percentage because it's a luxury car like a BMW or a Mercedes. So you got to be careful, make sure that's not part of your lease contract. And if it is, negotiate it. Negotiate. Everything's negotiable in a contract. All right, overage fees, we talked about that a little bit. You got to make sure that you're not getting hurt with a bunch of different fees that you don't know about. And then damage fees. I want to talk about that for real quick. I talked about wear and tear a little bit earlier. Wear and tear is this ambiguous term when it comes to leasing a car, because you might have a version of wear and tear, but I'll guarantee you the dealership or the leasing company has their version of wear and tear. Where a ding in 3 years might seem trivial to you, I mean, cars get dings all the time, right? To the dealership or the leasing company, a ding is huge, and you will end up paying for that. And so you've got to be careful when you take the car back in, and you got to understand before you even sign a lease what all those mean and what the consequences are of those. Say buy and walk away. I tell people this even when they're buying a car. You hold the power, because you don't have to buy a car. They have to sell one. Does that make sense? You hold all the power in all the negotiations. You have the right to walk away at any time. And I tell people this: if you get confused, you're tired, you're hungry, I don't care what the case is, walk away. Do not stay at that dealership. There's nothing keeping you there other than your emotion for that car that you're buying. And if you can't take the emotion out of it, then you will end up paying. So be prepared to walk away. You can walk away. Trust me, I've seen people walk away and the dealership follows them out the door and asks them to come back in and work out a deal with them, and they drive away with a new car and they got the deal they wanted. I've also seen people walk away, they drive away, the dealership doesn't come after them, but they call them back the next day and tell them that, hey, we can work out that deal that you wanted. So it pays to walk away, and I suggest you do that, especially if you get confused. Here's some car leasing tips. I'm not going to go over them all. I want to keep this webinar relatively short. We're already about 19 minutes into it, so I don't want to go. It's too much longer. Anyway, so the top one there, always negotiate the price. We talked about that. Always negotiate price, never monthly payments. Always negotiate up from dealer cost, not down from the sticker. Avoid telling the dealer what monthly payments you can afford. It just gives them ammunition to help get you into the car, and believe me, they'll get you that monthly payment, no problem at all. Always be prepared, knowing the dealer invoice. You should have already had that before you got into the dealership. Always come knowing what your trade-in is worth. That's another thing a lot of you skip, is you don't really know what your car's worth, and you're going to let the dealer tell you what your car's worth. Dealer will only pay wholesale for your car. They will not pay you retail. So you need to understand that, or work that into the negotiations down the road. Remember, you negotiate the car first, the new car. You don't talk about trade-in until after you negotiated a good deal with the new car, because it can get very confusing after a while. They throw a lot of numbers at you, right? And then one more from there. I just want to say real quick, don't sign anything. Don't sign until you've settled on a deal. Don't sign until you've read it. Read it line by line. Take your time. They'll seem like they're in a rush in there, and they are, because they got a lot of people going through there. But read it line by line, add the numbers up, make sure everything is in there before you sign that contract. And remember, your most valuable negotiating tool is your ability to walk out. Question and answers. I do want to go through what you get with our book, but let me answer these questions real quick, and we'll go through that after we get these done here. So first question is how can I buy a lease car at the end of the lease? That's a great question. Usually at the end of the lease, the purchase price of the car, known as the residual value. Remember, we talked about that earlier. It's almost always thousands of dollars more than the actual value of the car. Remember, they predict this residual value well in their favor, so they're covered at the end of the 3 years, no matter what, right? And so you're smart, you did your homework, you know that's way overpriced, and so you probably just want to turn your car in, right? But remember, you can negotiate that residual value. You can negotiate that price at the end of the contract. You're not locked into it. Remember, the dealer doesn't want the car back. One reason is because now he has to wholesale the car. So they don't want you to give the car back. So they'll be willing to negotiate with you. And if you do your homework and figure out what that car is really worth, you can do some negotiation with you on that as well. So I hope that helps. You can buy the car at the end of the lease, or you can just give it back. The next question, what payments might be due at the end of the lease? That's why I tell you to read the lease. Every lease is different, and so every lease has different verbiage in there as to what you're going to have to pay at the end of the lease. I know there's fees in there for excessive mileage. There's damage in the lease. Make sure you get all the details from the dealers. You want to know what all the fees are. There's a fee for returning it. There's a fee for them to clean it up and maybe put new tires on it, right? That's another thing you have to look at. So there's always a fee for returning the car. Make sure you know what it is. What are the charges for wear and tear? I talked about this again a little bit earlier. It's your version of wear and tear versus theirs. You have to make sure that's spelled out what wear and tear is. Is a ding a significant wear and tear, or is it not a big deal, right? Because cars get dings all the time. Scratches, is that wear and tear, or is that something significant? Is the dealer going to charge you to fix that scratch, right? All right, guys, that's it. I wanted to keep this short, but before we leave here, I just want to go over real quick what Don't Get Taken for a Ride is and how it can help you during the car buying process, right? First of all, Don't Get Taken for a Ride is a guidebook. It's a step-by-step guide on how to buy a new or used car. And we take you literally step by step. Step 1, you don't move on to step 2 until you have completed step 1. This helps avoid confusion and can save you a lot of money. So I already went over that, so we're just going to skip over that. And as I alluded to, you'd never move on to the next step until the previous step has been completed. It's very important that you follow these step by step. It'll save you literally thousands of dollars off the car. Right? So let's go over real quick what you get in this one. Step 1, it's the game. It's understanding the game and knowing how to win. I use the analogy of stepping onto the course with Tiger Woods, right? Nobody in their right mind would step onto the golf course and challenge Tiger Woods to a game of golf, right? It's just not going to happen, and you will lose unless you're a really, really good golfer. But it's the same analogy with going on into the dealership. Why would you walk into a dealership without knowing how their game is played? You got to understand, they've been doing this for years. The dealerships have been doing it for 30, 40, 50, 100 years, right? And how many times have you bought a car? Once, twice, 3 times maybe, 4? And how good are you at that game, right? So step 1 is basically understanding the game. And then step 2, shopping versus buying. I tell people this all the time. Keep those 2 separate. Your shopping trip should not be merged with your buying trip. If you're looking for a car, you're not sure what you want, yeah, go to the dealer, look at the car, check it out. Don't test drive it. It's very important that you don't get engaged. You just go to look to see if it's the type of car you want and it's what you thought it was. And then you move on to the next step, which is choosing the car, right? So choosing a car is you've already done the shopping. You kind of know what you want. There's maybe narrowed it down to a couple of cars. And then now there comes time to choose a car. So we go through all those in step 3 as well. The test drive. This is a fun part, but it can cost you a lot of money, especially if you're a motor mouth, especially if you like to talk. And what ends up happening is you end up giving a lot of information away to the to the salesman that you shouldn't be giving away, because he'll engage you in conversation like, hey, do you have an old car you're going to trade in? How much a monthly payment can you afford? All that good stuff. So the test drive is basically, it's to test drive the car. Make sure you like it. You listen to the car. Does it make funny sounds? Turn on the stereo. Does it work? Do you like the sound quality? That's what you should be test driving a car. You shouldn't be talking about payments during that test drive. What the dealer paid for the car. You should already know this before you did the test drive, because you have our book and you know that you need to do a little bit of homework. And this homework can pay off big time. As you can see, some dealers can make $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 off a car. And if you think I'm lying, go look. You've seen the advertisements on TV where they're displaying a car and saying it's $12,000 off, $15,000 off, and you're like, wow, how can they do that? Well, it kind of makes a light bulb go off, don't you think? Right. So step 6, the add-on sticker. We talk about this sticker. It's made to look like the manufacturer sticker, but there's a bunch of add-ons on it, and it's a bunch of stuff you don't need. And so we talk about that in the guidebook as well. Getting ready for your purchase, we tell you how to prepare for the purchase, and actually start to getting ready to negotiate, which is the next one here. Negotiate. Discover the art of negotiating. And it is an art. Remember, they've been doing this for years. And if you don't know, you don't have your ducks in a row and you didn't do your homework, then this is where it's going to cost you a lot of money. And remember, any one of these steps, right? Any one of them, you can walk out. So again, you get confused, uneasy, uncomfortable, walk away. It's going to save you a lot of money. And then step 9, we take you through the trade-in if you have one. This is the part where you tell them you have a trade-in. I negotiated the price of the car. Now I have a trade-in. Now I'm ready to talk about my trade-in. Do not mix the two together. They will bring out a piece of paper that has 4 squares on it, and you'll laugh when you see it because I mention it, and everybody does. But they're going to try to negotiate everything all at once. Keep them separate. This is how you save the most money. And then step 10, we go into financing the car. It's going into the finance department and actually signing the paperwork and all that good stuff. And then that's where they try to actually sell you more stuff. Car warranty, tire coverage, gap insurance. I mean, the list can go on. So we talk about that in step 10. Step 11 is read before you sign. I talked a lot about that. Always read before you sign. Right, and then the last step, you're almost done checking out the car. There's some things we talk about in there, making sure that if something was promised to you, that it's on the car or it's being delivered to you at some point in time, right? So that's it, guys. I don't want to, this has already gone almost 30 minutes, but it's very important. Look, leasing a car comes with its own problems, and if you're not well versed on it, you can, as you can see, as I showed you earlier when I ran the numbers, you can pay quite a bit more. And if you didn't negotiate the price of the car, think of how much more that you would have paid. So anyway, if you're thinking about getting don't get taken for a ride, if you're thinking about buying a car, this just kind of goes through that. There's in the book we do have the definitive guide to leasing, so it's much of what I talked about here we go expand upon in the book. And it's a used car section in there as well, so we talk about both new and used cars in there, and plus the top dealer scams. That's what you get in this book. And so one of the things that we offer that nobody else does is love it or return it. Look, if you get this book and you read through it and you're like, that's a bunch of hokey, send it back to us. Send it back to us. We'll refund your money and we'll part as friends. But I've never had a book returned because the information in there works. And if you work it and you go step by step, you will literally save money the next time you buy a car. Again, I want to reiterate, this is not a book you can buy off the shelf or on Amazon. It's a guidebook to buying a car. It is a step-by-step guide that walks you through the process of buying a car. So I hope this helped. We're going to make some more webinars. Please share this on social media. Spread this around. We don't advertise for this book, so we basically rely on word of mouth. And so if you could spread that around, that'd be fantastic. Appreciate it. Thank you guys very much. We will see you on the next webinar.